Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you're joining from. Welcome to this virtual event. What is DataOps Observability with SanjMo Advisory and Unravel Data? First, a quick number of housekeeping items. You can use the chat to say hello or leave a comment. Pop a question in the Q&A, and we'll get to as many of those as we can. And help us improve. Share your feedback on the session by rating this webinar, and let us know if there are other topics you'd like to hear about. Okay, so let's take a quick look at the agenda. So Sanjeev will set the stage for DataOps Observability, from what it is to why it's important. And then Chris Santiago will show us how to implement DataOps Observability. And we've reserved the last 20 minutes for your questions, where you can win swag. The top 10 questions will earn limited edition swag. So without further ado, here's our first guest speaker, Sanjeev Mohan, founder and CEO of SanjMo Advisory Services, formerly vice president at Gartner Research. Sanjeev is an established thought leader in the areas of cloud, big data, and analytics. He researches and advises on changing trends and technologies in the modern cloud data architectures. Until recently, he was a Gartner vice president known for his prolific and detailed research and for directing the data and analytics agenda. Now a principal at SanjMo, he provides advisory and consulting services covering modern data architectures, governance, data ops, data products, and observability. He regularly presents on topics pertaining to end-to-end data pipelines and helps businesses discover what their data can do for them. So with that, let me turn it over to Sanjeev. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Clinton. It's such an honor to be on this webinar, especially with my dear friends Clinton and Chris Santiago, to talk about one of my favorite topics, which is data observability. This year, 2022, is coming to an end, and it's been quite a turbulent year from a data and analytics point of view. On one side of the coin, we've seen unprecedented growth in so many different areas and technologies, but on the other side, we're ending this year with some economic headwinds that have impacted many of us. I've been lucky to have researched many of these topics that have taken root, and they vary from all kinds of topics. I'll touch upon some of them, like data products, data mesh, data lake houses, but especially data observability has risen to becoming from a not as well understood an area to becoming really an important space for all of us. So what I'd like to do is share with you some of my findings as I get an opportunity to talk to a large number of end users, analysts, vendors, and because I present on this topic and I go from different cities to different cities. So I've built my own point of view. In fact, I'll show you how even my own point of view on data observability has evolved since I started looking into this space. So with that, I've created just a handful of slides. The agenda for today, as Clinton said, is that I will give you an overview of what is data observability and why it's in existence before I hand it off to Chris, so he can give you a real-life demo of how the concepts that I'm sharing are executed through Unravel's product. So with that, there are three major market pressures that we are dealing with. The first one is, I mentioned to you how the economy downturn is happening, so which has caused organizations to reduce their IT spend, except there are some bright spots that have not yet faced slowdown, cloud being one. In fact, I would say the bigger data and analytics space, when I talk to vendors, they may see there's the sales cycle may be a bit longer, for example, but they're not seeing a significant slowdown. And that is the power of data and analytics. It has become so foundational to what we do that organizations are are being very careful with their spend. They may be cutting down in some other areas, but not in the core technologies. So that itself drives a lot of market trends, and we will talk about them in a few minutes. What are some other market drivers? The second market driver I'm also witnessing is that we've seen this year and for the last few years, a profusion of new products, new approaches, new technologies. In fact, conventional wisdom says that why do I have a dozen products in data observability and literally hundreds in database management systems and so on? This is an era of consolidation. But do we see consolidation? Not a lot. We see a few examples. What we see instead is that a lot of brilliant minds are still building new innovative ways of handling our workloads, and we see an explosion in the number of tools and technologies. What does that mean? The end user now has to figure out what is the right technology, how do I reduce my complexity, and how do I future-proof myself? So while it's hard to find people who can tie together all of these moving pieces, we see that there's a trend to simplify, to integrate stuff. So we will talk more about that. The final market driver that I see, which is impacting us, is in the space of protecting sensitive data. We are now, for the last few years, have been following the example set by the European Union through its GDPR. We see new regulations are coming into force pretty much every few weeks. We see new countries that want to protect sensitive data, data privacy, data security are extremely important at this point in time. In fact, in California, we were one of the pioneers in the US in terms of data privacy laws, and we came up with CCPA, but in just a matter of 10 days, there is a new regulation that further enhances CCPA. It's called CPRA. It goes into effect 1st of January. So because of these market drivers, what we are seeing is that there is a huge emphasis on integrating, simplifying, and understanding what happens between a data producer and a data consumer. What happens between these two is data management. But how well we do the data management is what we call data ops. So data management is maybe the ETL process or the reporting process, but the level of automation we put, the testing that we put, all that falls under what we call data ops. So here is my definition of data ops. There are many definitions, and I have drawn upon experts in the space and taken different parts and pieces. And what I'm saying is that data ops is actually a set of best practices and technologies. It is not theory. It is actual practice of building and operationalizing your products and data management. Some definitions of data ops are very focused on build. How do you automate that build process? But data ops goes beyond build into deployment. And why do we need it? We want to improve the quality of what we deliver, the speed at which we deliver new releases, collaborate, and promote a culture of continuous improvement. So there's a lot to parse here, but I wanted to bring to light data ops because after many, many years of DevOps being in place, we are now starting to borrow these best practices and principles from our application and infrastructure cousins. So they've been doing this for a long time. Now we are taking the same concepts and we are applying to data. It has taken us a bit longer to do data ops than DevOps. That is because data by its very nature is different from applications and infrastructure. Data changes all the time. And if an application goes down, no problem. I can reboot. I can have the Docker container through Kubernetes can bring up my application, and I may face a little bit of a glitch, but my application is back up and running. But if the data goes down, it may corrupt your database. And if it corrupts your database, then it's game over. Then you have to recover the database. And that's why DataOps has taken a little bit longer to take shape. Now, the next thing I want to talk to you is one of the very critical things in DataOps is to have the ability to observe and monitor how that data is performing, and then take decisions based on the outcomes of the data so that we can provide higher quality, reliability, and efficiency. So this is what we call data observability. So data observability is a new topic, but not observability. Observability, once again, like DevOps, has been around for many, many years. In this table, the first column you see is operations. This is observability as we define for applications and infrastructure. You hear about companies in this space a lot. Datadog, you hear about App Dynamics, Dynatrace, New Relic, Sumo Logic. There's so many products in this space. Some of them only look at application, and they may go by a term called application performance management, or APM. Data observability is different. It takes the same ideas of monitoring, the ability to detect anomalies and failures as quickly as we can, so we can rectify them faster, and it applies it to data. The two areas it applies to are data quality and data pipeline. We will talk more about this. So our entire focus of today's webinar is on these two topics. But I also wanted to show you, in the spirit of completion, that we also have model ops, which is making sure the health of machine learning models is maintained and having that end-to-end deployment of models as they get versioned. We also have security and understanding how security is being applied to data and infrastructure. And then we have KPI, or business monitoring, also in this space. So with this, I want to take you to drilling down into what is data observability. So as you can see, data observability definition is vague, and it is defined differently. There are now a number of companies in this space driven by customer demand, customer need for this. And the second reason for the rise of data observability is that a lot of venture capital companies, VCs, have invested a lot of money in this space. And the reason is because there are two areas that are extremely critical. Business users want high quality data. The end goal is trust. The data engineers, scientists, they want their data pipelines to run reliability. These are the two major components of data observability. A very large number of companies are actually in just the data quality space, because data quality is so foundational for us to do any kind of use or analytics of that data. So two different personas. In my opinion, for a data observability company to be comprehensive, it needs to provide these two areas of observability. Interestingly, as I mentioned to you earlier, my own point of view has evolved, and I have added a third piece, which I find extremely critical. And I see companies like Unravel spending a lot of time in observing how the business is performing and how the financial aspects of my data products are taking place. And this is the ultimate goal of every chief data officer or CDO is to demonstrate value of their data. And that value comes from BizOps and FinOps. All these three together give me data observability. You can see these are three different personas that are most interested in this. What is the end reason and why this has become such a big deal? Typically, what used to happen before data observability started coming into existence is that the CFO in the morning would come to work and look at his or her dashboard, look at all the data that came in from the night before, analyzed into this beautiful looking report, and they would use a browser. But the problem at that point is that the CFO may at that point detect and say, that number does not look right. I don't believe that my sales could have dipped so much or increased by a certain amount. I suspect that there's a data quality problem in it. So at this point, the CFO raises an alarm. The entire IT team, or a vast majority of it, goes into firefighting mode. All the innovation stops, and everybody is now heads down trying to do root cause analysis of what went wrong. So this is a very, very bad way to have the end user be your QA testing person. With data observability, we push the anomaly detection to left. So we do shift left, we continuously test, we detect what's going wrong, we take action. Maybe a pipeline did not run last night. That's why there's a dip in my numbers. So we rerun that pipeline, we diagnose what the problem is, and we fix it. So next time we are not affected by this problem. We have notifications in place. All of that is a heavy lifting that data observability does, so the end user does not have to figure out, they have more confidence in data. So the last slide I want to talk to you about is, in our effort to build data products, there are three major use cases of metadata that are starting to converge. For the longest time, we have been focused on data catalogs, data governance, and this is lineage and understanding where the data is coming from. That data governance is now being very closely tied to data access security and privacy, and that is now being tied to DataOps and data quality being one piece of that. And you can now see automation, orchestration, continuous testing, CI/CD, managing your configuration and your environments, and doing data observability is really important. At this point, I can go on for a long time, but I know I'm cutting into the wonderful demo that Chris has put together. So I will stop sharing my screen. Clinton, back to you.
Thank you so much, Sanjeev. Really appreciate that context. That's fantastic. All right, so now it's my pleasure to introduce Chris Santiago, VP of Solutions Engineering at Unravel Data, where he leads a global team dedicated to helping customers solve challenges with data performance, cost, and quality. And so excited to have you with us here today, Chris. So
thanks, Clinton.
I'll hand it over to you.
Sure. Hi, folks. So again, my name is Chris Santiago. I lead the Solutions Engineering group here at Unravel Data. Have the pleasure of working with multiple customers all over the world, solving some of their biggest data challenges. But for today, we're going to focus in on how data observability is executed through Unravel, which is a purpose-built platform built for the modern data stack for data teams. So let me go ahead and share my screen here. So I'm going to go and take Sanjeev's lead here and drill down on those three vectors that was very interesting on his talk about data observability. I'll be walking you through a day in the life for folks that may be focusing in on value. So think of the business leadership that is looking to track how my investments in some of these data stacks are growing or not growing over time. We'll spend some time about reliability. So think about this as like the support teams, the development teams themselves, that are looking to make sure that their data pipelines are reliable. So I'll be able to walk you through a day in the life of that. Last but not least, we'll talk about ultimately, once the data is actually provided for the analysts, how do we trust the data? How do we make sure that the data that lands here is actually trustworthy, is the golden copy, so that way we don't lose the trust of the end users of the overall process. So we'll start first on the value vector here. And before I go into Unravel itself, I did want to kind of set the stage. So folks that are doing this today, they may be using some of the tools that are out there today, right? So think of value, cost comes to mind. And so when we're starting to talk about things, especially on the cloud, you do have dashboards that are available from the cloud provider themselves, right? Those can be challenging because they are aggregated up to a certain granularity, right? So if I want to get very granular in terms of understanding how a user is actually using up my resources over time, say I'm trying to keep an eye out on costs, it gets challenging from that standpoint. It's also a batch process, right? Having some of this information from a real-time perspective to really be alerted more real-time doesn't really exist. And so folks that are looking to track costs, so think of like your FinOps department or just folks in general that are just looking to adhere to a budget, it can become challenging. And so life with Unravel is we do have features that are specific to that particular use case. We'll start here on this chargeback report, which gives me a very 10,000-foot view of where costs are going, in this case, in the last 30 days. So we have things that we can filter by. We'll start here on the workspace level. And so what you're seeing here is where my cost is going across all of my environment in terms of a metric in DBU. So this is an example that's running off of customers that may be using Databricks. Snowflake would look very similar. Cost is another very important vector, the number of clusters. And so I can start seeing where my cost or where my resources are going across all of my workspaces in this particular case. And so I can start seeing, hey, looks like my workspace that is supporting my AI ML use case is, spending a decent amount here. I can also start grouping things by, say, for example, user. I want to really just start understanding very granular I don't care what resources that they're using. I just want to know how many resources that users are using. And here I can actually see it tells a little bit different story here. I can see that this particular user here in the blue is actually taking up a lot of resources. In fact, 90.88% in this example. So really quickly, I can start zoning in. So think of this as folks that may be running a center of excellence, right? We want to start identifying who some of these outliers are, who might be spending the most in my organization. And I can see here that this particular user is taking up a lot of resources. Don't know exactly what he's doing, but interesting information nonetheless. So maybe what I might do is maybe just start tracking this particular user from a budget standpoint, because I want to start understanding and start setting guardrails so that way we can get ahead of cost overruns in this particular case. So I'm going to go ahead into this budget here. We've got some new budgets here, but I'm going to go ahead and create a new one here. So I'm going to go ahead and select on this new budget. And I know that this particular user is in my engineering. So I'll go ahead and give it a name here. And I've got a couple of other things in terms of how I'm going to track this. We're going to track by this DBU metric, which is really just a resource metric. We're going to track this month over month. I'll just use the defaults here. The scope is where we can get very granular, right? So if I want to get down to that particular user and set a budget, I can go ahead and do that. Here we go. I can see here that this particular user last month had used about 1,600, a little over 1,600 DBUs in this particular case. So I'm going to set my guardrail here at 1,600. I'm going to go ahead and hit save. And here we have that particular budget that's set. A couple of things to note here is we can see where that particular user is at right now at the present moment. So this is in a batch process. Unravel is actually taking in this information as soon as we see it and process it. So we can see in real time where usage is at. We can see where our budget's at, and you see that it's in yellow. And so that's interesting. So what I can see here is that this insight here is telling me that by the end of December, which is the month that we're in, we're forecasted about a little over 1,300, right? So the way that things are going right now, we could go over budget. And so that's why it's in yellow. And so if I am a business user or a business leader that wants to start tracking things at either at a global level or even as fine-grained as the user level, I can actually start setting this up today, and even setting up, for example, like alerts. So that way I can start getting alerted ahead of time before budgets start getting blown. So that way I can actually do something, as opposed to, say, for example, my finance budget here, which had a allocation of 1,000 DBUs in this particular case, and we've already blown past that in this particular month. And then another example here would be something that's green, where we're tracking, and it looks like we're not going to go over our 2,500 here. We're actually forecasted at 1,600. So from a value perspective, this becomes very powerful for folks like those business leaders that are really just tracking, how is my investment doing over time? And if it is going over budget, what are some of the things that I can do to be proactive and be alerted when things are starting to get off? So that way I can go ahead and address that moving forward. The next use case here is really to start talking about the developers, right? So they likely are working on pipelines. And so with these pipelines, they're going to be very interested in making sure that things are reliable, things are working as expected. If things had failed, how quickly can I go ahead and resolve it? And so I'll show you a day in life for those folks. Now, if you are on this call right now and you are living this life right now, I feel your pain, because you are probably using the command line for maybe writing your code, or maybe you're using an IDE. When you submit these jobs, or actually maybe you're using an orchestration engine like Airflow to be submitting these jobs. And so that's yet another tool. When things do fail, you're looking at logs at Airflow. You may be looking at things and say, for example, we were in Databricks. It's trying to get all this information, and it's really up to you as the developer to correlate all this information from disparate systems and really come to an understanding of what the root cause is and then what the next step is. So pretty cumbersome task. Now I'm going to show you a day in the life for that same data engineer with Unravel. And what you're seeing on the screen right now is our pipeline view. And so really what this is showing is just a history of a pipeline, in this particular case, a single job run that is running over time. We can see things in terms of duration. So how long is this taking? I'll go ahead and just do this. I can see here normally that my time is pretty even here, but I noticed that right around here, things actually went up in time, right? So even though Airflow is actually executing this, I can actually start seeing how this job run was executed over time. Now, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm actually going to go ahead and click on this particular arrow here. And you can see this line here is now we're here. We can see that before we were at 6 minutes and now we were at 9 minutes. So I can start seeing that there are some bottlenecks that are affecting the SLA for this particular pipeline. Now, here's the interesting thing. Right now we are in the pipeline view. I'm going to actually go ahead and click on this run, and it's actually going to take me to this particular Spark environment here. And now I can actually see that this particular job run, I can see that I could look at things such as like errors. So was there an error that actually caused this to actually slow down? I can look at the logs itself. Why this is really powerful is this is actually bringing in all this information from Airflow, from Spark, from the logs itself. And so as a developer, I can come in here and notice where the anomalies are and quickly troubleshoot it and come up with my root cause. So that way I can really increase the reliability of my pipelines and really ensure that SLAs are being met for the organization. So from a reliability standpoint, I can go ahead and increase the reliability of my organization pipelines, which is a very powerful thing to do for the developers themselves. Last but not least, all this information that I've been showing here has, been very focused in on the processing side. I'm going to go ahead and spend some time here on the data. And so from the data itself, there's a couple of things that that folks may be interested in, right? From data, they may be interested in terms of from a performance standpoint. Like think of things such as like, this is a large table. Are things partitioned? For the DBAs on the call here, are my tables, do we have statistics? So that way when the query analyzer is looking at the query itself, it's making the best guesses about how to execute queries more efficiently and fully. And what's like the size of the data itself. So here, again, back in my Databricks environment here, I can see in my Delta Lake tables here, I can look at things such as hot, warm, and cold. I can look at sizes, the number of folks that are actually using the tables itself. I can look at other things in terms of just drilling in particular tables and start getting information from that standpoint. But it's great that we can see all this information. I'm going to go ahead and actually click on one of these tables over here, which is going to bring me into this table level view here. And we have this analysis tab here, which is essentially looking at things from a table perspective. And essentially what we're saying here is that, hey, in this particular table, this is a dimensional column table here. It's my customer table here. I can see that there are certain expectations that I've actually created for this particular table. So things such as like, I wasn't expecting any null values here, but now I'm actually seeing that Unravel is actually showing that there are no values. We can see that I set an expectation of the number of rows, and we can see that this is actually falling out of range as well. We can also look at things in terms of how many columns we were expecting in terms of like the final stage of my ETL process, and we can see that that has failed as well. So while we're looking at things from a pipeline perspective, we're seeing that the table here at the end state has some issues, right? And so we can go back into the pipelines and we can actually start seeing where was this particular error actually fired. And so we can actually start looking at when in the ETL pipeline did this particular rogue data get introduced, which particular stage in the ETL pipeline. And so that way I can now understand and maybe even prevent this from happening itself, right? In terms of creating maybe some logic to say, hey, if any of these quality insights actually get triggered, kill the process before this actually gets downstream, and then alert the owner themselves, right? So from a reliability standpoint, being able to get ahead or being able to identify where these quality issues were presented in the whole entire process itself is very powerful. But then more importantly, being able to be alerted to the particular owner of that particular pipeline when this actually happens, so they can go ahead and resolve this. So the business owners, the analysts themselves, once they actually get to the data themselves, they now, we can address that before they see it. So again, there were multiple personas that I had talked about here for DataOps, right? Whether it's the support teams that are supporting these pipelines, whether it's the developers themselves, looking and trying to make sure that things are fast as possible, meeting their SLAs without wasting resources, bubbling up to the folks that own the budget, right? Or the folks that are the business leaders that have funded this technology, so that way they can innovate and bring their products to market quicker. All of these essentially are data teams. And what I've shown here is that DataOps, data observability is a very important framework to be following. And whether you are any of those roles that I had mentioned, you can see here that this Unravel is a DataOps observability platform built for the modern data stack. So I'll pause there, and Clinton, I'll hand it back to you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Chris. That's fantastic. All right. Really appreciate all the questions that have been coming in here. So this is really exciting. And we've got two experts on the call. So if you haven't gotten your question in yet, please feel free to use the Q&A button to add that, and we'll try to get to as many as we can in the remaining time. Okay, so first question that has come in. If I'm migrating to a modern data stack, do I still need DataOps observability, or is it baked in? So Sanjeev, since you're familiar with this space, maybe you could answer this one.
Thank you, Clinton. This is a common question we get frequently, and the answer is absolutely. You need a modern data observability product, because what is modern data stack? It is a collection, it's an arbitrary collection, if I may, of a number of products. For example, I may use something like Fivetran for doing my data ingestion, dbt for doing data transformation, Snowflake for persistence, Looker for doing my data visualization, and then I may have any number of data orchestration tools like Airflow. If you look at each product, they may provide you enough metadata and APIs to extract some observability information. But Fivetran has no idea how Looker is going to use, what reports are being built. Snowflake doesn't know where this data is coming from. Airflow is orchestrating the whole thing. Spark is being used. So all of these products that constitute a modern data stack are coming together to deliver the outcomes you need, but they only know what's happening in their space. So a third-party product stitches them all together. It shows that the data originated in this data source, there was a change data capture, some data movement, which landed it into staging area. Data transformation tool then modified it. There were a number of pipelines, these Spark jobs, as Chris was showing. There were ETL jobs, and then here are the reports that are using them. So that's why you need a comprehensive a comprehensive product that ties together these different products. I hope that helps.
Thank you so much, Sanjeev. Really appreciate that. Okay, next question is, application observability is a big category already. So how is DataOps observability different? And maybe Sanjeev, what is your perspective on this one?
Yeah, so great question. Thank you for asking. Application observability has proven to us why we need to observe applications and make sure that they are being run reliably and with proper cost performance. Data observability takes the same concepts and applies it to data. So this ability, for example, let's say I run Unravel on my pipeline, data pipeline, and it says that you're using X amount of Spark nodes. However, most of them are underutilized. So you have over-provisioned your cloud resources. At that point in time, I can then say, oh, wow, okay, I can save some cost here. And by the way, this cost is not marginal. This cost adds up. And especially, as I mentioned, that right now there's so much emphasis on cost, I can right-size my resources so I get the best consumption price performance out of that. So just like application observability, what it did to applications, data observability is now being used to do the same thing for data.
Really appreciate that. Thank you, Sanjeev. Okay, next question. Okay, when should we implement DataOps observability? Now, Chris, maybe you could share your thoughts on this one.
Sure. I think organizations, depending on where they're at on their data journey, if you're looking to modernize and implement a digital transformation, that should be part, absolutely, of your design and planning process. It's also possible that I've talked with customers where they may not know it, but they may be starting to apply DataOps principles, right? So I was on a call earlier this week with a quorum of CDOs, and when asked about like, hey, what are folks doing from a DataOps observability? I think that some folks didn't actually have a specific department practice for it. But then they were describing things such as, I have somebody from finance that's looking at the actual bills from the providers, and as granular as they can, maybe they can start understanding which department where things are looking to be where more spend is, right? And so they would have a manual conversation in terms of like, hey, we think that there's some usage going on here, or some bad code behavior. From that standpoint, go ahead and look at it, right? We also have some folks that may already be doing this, but using some of the DevOps tools that are out there today, things such as Datadog. So I think that there's folks that are trying to do it. They may be using some of the DevOps tools that are there today, but maybe struggling in terms of, are we actually getting things, the right visibility, the right observability, in terms of, the language that they want to speak. So I think, when it should be doing it, I think it really just depends on where you are, but, definitely when you're looking to modernize is a good time to start implementing DataOps.
Yeah, if I may add something to it, I think Chris hit the nail on the head. When should people do it depends upon their maturity. If you are a startup, for instance, and you're just starting to build your MVP, and you have a few data sources and you're building your applications, maybe observability is not something that you need right now. If you are an organization with very large number of data sources and you keep adding to it, then observability becomes a very important part of your stack. Now, even here, we see two different types of things happen. One are people who have who understand the need, and they are being held back by not having observability. So they want to get efficient, and they recognize the need. So these are the organizations that maybe they're modernizing, moving to the cloud, or whatever it may be. So they are the ones who look at the products and they say, I don't need to do a proof of concept. I'm bought in. I know that I need this technology. I need proof of value. I want to see how quickly can I get value from this. The second type of customers I talk to are those who built their in-house environment, and they may be struggling, but now they've invested so much in it, and there is so much of political baggage, and the culture may not be that advanced, that they may resist getting a more modern data observability product in place, and they then continue to use whatever homegrown tools they have. The problem with that approach is that they keep adding to it as new and new products get added to the stack. So you build this technical debt, if you may, but the point is that they still do have observability, except it's not necessarily the most up-to-date and modern way of doing it. But some of these people have written scripts. They've written a ton of scripts. These are SQL scripts. They run every night, and they do select, count, star from this table and that table, and then they do analysis, and they say, oh, it looks like some pipeline may have failed because that count star of records shows that we have fewer records than we had the day before. So you see, we see these are different types of companies that are looking at data observability. Is Chris? You talked a lot.
Absolutely. Yeah, you're spot on. I mean, everything that you've said. I mean, there's definitely folks that are trying to do it themselves. The only thing I would add is that even though with the do-it-yourselfers, there may be gaps into what they're looking at, right? For example, they may have observability tools that are looking very specifically about just infrastructure. But when you're looking at distributed environments, say, for example, Databricks or Snowflake, or for that matter, different architectures, different things that some of these other, homegrown tools, or maybe even some of the APM solutions that are out there are only solving maybe 10, 20% of the problems that are out there. So yes, people are absolutely trying to get this to work, but yes, you need a modernized approach built for specifically just the data needs for the data teams to really be effective.
Very nice. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you both, Chris and Sanjeev, on that one. So we've talked about FinOps, pipeline reliability. What other use cases come up for DataOps observability? And maybe Sanjeev, have you seen some other use cases come up?
Yeah, this is an interesting thing. As I've been saying, my own point of view evolves over time as I see more and more people use data observability in many different use cases. It started mainly as, for data consumption, quality, making sure I have the right level of quality of data so I can trust it. I've also seen some use cases where organizations are saying that in the process of modernizing my data and analytics infrastructure, I have two options. I can either lift and shift what's on premises directly into the cloud, but then I'm not taking advantage of all the elasticity and pay as you go and all these wonderful things that cloud provides. So the second option is, how do I migrate to the cloud in a more intelligent fashion? In order to do that, you need to get a good grasp over how well or unwell is your application running on premises, and then gather those statistics, have the tool recommend to you that if you are going to move to, let's say, AWS, then the recommendation is to use certain type of instances with certain amount of memory or IO or things like that, and you right size your cloud migration from get-go. So instead of driving up your cost by running your workload in the cloud in the most unoptimized manner, use data observability to intelligently migrate to the cloud. Chris?
Yeah, I actually just got off a call with one of the tech modern data stack providers, and another use case that was very top of mind for them was just the life cycle of development, right? I think that folks that have been living in this world for some time, and if you come from a software development, traditional web app type of world, you're very familiar with very mature processes and tools that are in place in terms of the life cycle, whether writing quality code from development, getting that up all the way up into production, making sure once it's in production, now it's in maintenance mode, and making sure that it's running performant and sized rightly, especially on the cloud. So I think, that is something else that people are starting to ask for in terms of like, hey, the product maturity that, of the solutions that are out right now, not as mature as, the traditional application development world. And so folks are starting to use Unravel, for example, for looking at that in terms of, let's make sure that things don't have data skew, or we don't have things a lot of single threaded, some contended drivers, for example. So getting this baked in and making sure at each step of the development cycle is also something that we're starting to see emerge. That's a very valid data ops or data observability use case.
Very nice. Thank you, Chris and Sanjeev, both. That was excellent. Okay, a question here about, where does the workload get compute for the Unravel product? Is this pushed down to SaaS tools like Snowflake for compute, or does it use its own compute? How does it charge back to the user of your product? More specifically, pricing.
Sure.
So Chris, do you want to share an overview of how Unravel uses cloud computing services?
Yeah. So I'll keep it high level, but absolutely happy to further drill down on this just for the sake of time. But Unravel, how it gets installed, it would be in a customer's VPC. We take all this information. We take as much granular information about the jobs and the environment, the infrastructure itself, so that way we can aggregate up to whatever level we want. It makes it a lot easier for us to do it from that standpoint. All the processing is actually done on the Unravel instance, so we're not taking any compute from some of the environments themselves. So rest assured, we're not going to up the your compute usage from that standpoint. But yeah, we do it to be very lightweight as possible. The information that we are collecting, we are very diligent about not affecting performance or anything from that standpoint, because that would be adverse to what we're trying to do. But ultimately, all this information we send over to Unravel, and we do all the processing from that instance itself. And happy to have a deeper conversation, but hopefully that answers that.
Perfect. Yeah, thank you, Chris. Okay, next question. Does Unravel give us a 360-degree view of all of the tools in the ecosystem, or does it only focus on data warehouses like Snowflake? Chris, do you mind taking that one?
Sure. Yeah, I can absolutely take that. So, our vision is to be the observability platform for all the modern data stacks, right? Snowflake is one. Databricks. Think about anything that you're doing data at scale that needs parallel processing, right? Even just other technologies, very popular ones like EMR or even BigQuery. These are our stacks that we want to focus on, and everything that you had seen in the demo. Obviously, some of these features don't take into account for things that might be serverless, but it's that the core tenets about value, reliability, and trust are all the same. So you would expect the same for those type of environments.
Perfect. Thank you, Chris. Yeah. Now, there's a question about does Unravel read data or only metadata? And more specifically, looking for details from a security point of view.
Yeah, so it's up to how you want to configure us, right? So by default, we only look at the metadata. So we're not actually looking at the data itself. So things from a performance standpoint, if that's what you're looking to solve for, we just need metadata. We don't need to see the data itself. Now, when it comes to the quality, then yes, we need to start looking at the data, because we need to be able to start reporting against the quality standpoint, right? But all the stuff is configurable. So for customers that don't want us accessing the data, okay, we can definitely do that. But then, but then the quality part gets impacted because we won't be able to see it. So, but ultimately, we want to do right with whatever the customer is comfortable with. The only thing that I would add is that we are installed in a customer's environment. So this isn't a public SaaS endpoint. So, a lot of times that could, that satisfies the equation for some of these, SecOps groups that are very mindful of security. Well, if it never even reaches the public to begin with, that's also an angle that we can do as well.
Okay, great. And then there's another question here for you, Chris, about how do we see bad queries being fired by users? Or is Unravel only focusing on specifically Airflow jobs?
That's a great question. So, in the interest of time, I had to select specific scenarios, but the net of it is we are actually looking at all jobs. So it's not just bad SQL. It could also just be bad configuration. Maybe I oversized my Databricks VM instances. I didn't need as much resources as I selected. Or maybe I've just defaulted to just auto scaling everything, which is very powerful. Don't get me wrong. But when you're starting with such a low minimum number of nodes, there's time wasted if things get are auto scaling. So or data skew, I think actually I showed that, but bad SQL, things of that nature. Is really think about it as an AI engine that is looking at inefficiencies in multiple vectors, and think of it as really just showing across the whole entire organization here are all the inefficiencies of the jobs, right? Again, very, very powerful stuff. Kind of goes back to my software development, lifecycle use case, but being able to service that at the job level becomes very powerful, because a lot of times customers may have legacy code that's been just passed over the years, and they just lift and shifted it over and didn't realize that this legacy application had a bunch of select stars in it, or the data that it's actually looking at is massively skewed, and it's causing performance issues, right? So I would think of it more of as like an expert in the box, so to speak, that's actually checking all the code and identifying all the inefficiencies, not just bad SQL or things at the pipeline level.
Amazing. Thank you, Chris. Okay, final question. Do we also have some automation around fixing anything which is identified as part of this tool, or is it just a notification like a dashboard? Great
question. So think of us as that observability platform that is like, almost think about it as like 2.0, right? Where when you think of observability, it's kind of like just showing you, where the problematic issues are, right? We're taking it a step further by proactively telling you what could be the next step for you. So that's very powerful stuff, right? Because these technologies are very complex. A lot of times they require expertise, which, by the way, these are pretty new at the end of the day, some of these technologies, right? So being able to up-level your organization is super powerful. But then last but not least, we do have, I lightly touched on it during the demo, but auto actions, things that we can actually be more proactive itself in terms of, let's actually proactively alert people. We've had some customers take that and actually use it to like kill jobs, right? So yeah, I mean, we can get as automated as possible, but think of us as that AI engine that's identifying things, whether they pass a specific threshold. So that way, yeah, we're trying to get to that state where this ends up actually being self-healing, right? I think that's the most ideal state, but we're getting there.
Fantastic. Thank you, Chris, Sanjeev. All right, that is a wrap. Let's give it up for Chris and Sanjeev. Thank you both for your time and expertise. And thanks to all of you for participating in our virtual event. We hope you enjoyed understanding more about DataOps Observability. And you'll receive a follow-up email with a recap and a link to share your thoughts via a survey. On behalf of all of us here, we hope to see you at another event in the near future. In the meantime, feel free to reach out to me with any questions. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Take care.